UN General Assembly holds session to forge a collective repose to the coronavirus pandemic. Ravaging floods and devastating drought, what the UN State of Climate reports means for Africans. And Nigerian parliament seeks audience with President Buhari following Saturday's Boko Haram killings. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. And tonight, I'm alongside my colleague Uche, who has our business headlines. Uche.
Thanks, Richard. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Nigeria steps up its efforts to revive its oil refineries amid rising costs. And South Africa's Unemployment Insurance Fund is facing pressure to support ailing businesses. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, it is back to you, Richard.
Thank you so much, Uche. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. I'm Richard Nta. So good to have you with us. We begin in New York City, where the United Nations General Assembly is holding a special two-day session to talk about the global response to the coronavirus pandemic. In his address to the Assembly, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for global solidarity and a sense of urgency to confront COVID-19. He asked leaders to take the opportunity of the special session of the General Assembly to confront the COVID-19 pandemic with the urgency it demands to save lives and to build a better future together. Nearly 100 world leaders and dozens of government ministers are set to speak on how the international community is addressing the crisis. UN General Assembly President Volkan Bozkır of Turkey has called the session, quote, a historic moment, close quote, saying the world was looking to the UN for leadership. The UN says the COVID-19 pandemic is not the only greatest global health crisis since the organization was founded since 75 years ago. It is also a socio-economic security and humanitarian crisis. Let's turn our attention to Nigeria now, where Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari has come under enormous pressure to sack the country's military chief following the killing of at least 43 farmers in the northeast Borno state. Boko Haram has since claimed responsibility for the Saturday killing, which have elicited angry reactions across the country. CGTN's Deji Badmus has more on that story.
It's very rare to see lawmakers from Nigeria's ruling party openly criticize the president on any subject, but this time, angered by the killings of the farmers on Saturday, the 28th of November, senators from Buhari's own party did not hold back, calling on the president to fire his military chiefs.
That whatever it is that the security chiefs are doing presently is not working, or at least not enough. And if the president insists that the security chiefs are doing their work well, then the logical implication of such assumption is that the president, as the constitutional commander-in-chief of the country, has failed in his most rudimentary assignment of securing this nation.
It is time for Mr. President to allow our service chiefs to go. They have done their best. They have worked so hard. The best anybody can give is his best. You cannot give what you do not have.
The tone was no different in the lower house of parliament, where after a rowdy session, lawmakers there passed a motion inviting the president to come before lawmakers to explain the security situation in the country. 24 hours after that motion, the speaker was at the presidential villa to personally pass on the message to the president.
What we basically sought was to convey the resolution of the House and to fix a date, which we did not fix, out of respect for Mr. President and his very, very tight schedule. What date will be convenient, and we have agreed on a date, and he will meet with the House to address the situation.
Even when the president appears before the lawmakers, it would be the first time he would be doing so other than the traditional budget presentation before Parliament, and it would be the first time any president would openly address lawmakers on security issues.
I don't think the president needed the Senate or the House of Rep to spur him to come stand before them to now ask him what is he doing to quell the insecurity. I don't think also consistently retaining the service chiefs will do the president any good, because it's like a football team.
You cannot be losing matches with the same team members and then you refuse to make substitution.
The current situation in the country is certainly not what the president or any Nigerian bargained for when this government came to power back in 2015. There were high hopes back then that being a retired military general, President Buhari was going to bring an end to the Boko Haram insurgency and secure the country. But those hopes are now fast fading away. Even the president's party men are beginning to question his own method. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa was expected to face a vote of no confidence motion against him in the country's parliament on Thursday. However, this was not to be after it was delayed at the last minute by an urgent court case brought by the same party that had initiated the vote. Angela Coppola has more on that story.
The African Transformation Movement went to court on Thursday morning to seek a ruling on the Speaker's announcement that the vote would not be conducted by secret ballot. The court agreed to hear the case in February next year.
The court takes, after reading the papers, takes our application very seriously. You know, we've been given 2 days. The matter is adjourned to the 3rd and 4th of February next year. Well, to us, it says for the fact that the matter was not dismissed outright, and we are given full 2 days for the hearing. It means the court wants to apply its mind, look at all our arguments, and make the informed decision.
It appears that the Speaker made her decision based on a precedent related to Ramaphosa's predecessor, Jacob Zuma, and one of the 9 votes of no confidence motions during his leadership.
I agreed to the postponement, among other things, in the light of a similar arrangement made in 2017, when the Speaker's decision on the matter of a secret ballot was taken on review. In that instance, the motion of no confidence was postponed until the court had made a determination.
The postponement was a moot point for 2 opposition parties. The United Democratic Front and the Democratic Alliance had already indicated earlier that they were boycotting the vote.
He has certainly let South Africans down during this COVID crisis. We haven't seen him starting to implement his economic reform agenda yet. So what we're doing is we're abstaining, and by abstaining, we're putting the president on terms. And we're explaining to him very clearly that we consider this to be his notice period.
Now that this debate has been postponed at least until February next year, it gives the president and his advisors some opportunity to get the economy back on track. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Let's shift our focus to Southern Africa, where Namibia has decided to put 170 wild elephants up for sale due to increased human-wildlife conflict worsened by current drought. The country's Ministry of Environmental Affairs and Tourism says it will auction the animals to anyone in Namibia or abroad who meets strict criteria, which include having proper quarantine facilities and necessary protective fencing. CGTN's Travers Andrews has the details.
With a population of just over 2.5 million people, Namibia is a dry and arid country that will struggle to sustain a large population due to a scarcity in water resources. Now, the drought has really compounded this problem and has also brought humans and elephants into much greater contact, a situation that has resulted in increased conflict. Namibian authorities have been forced to act following this latest drought by auctioning off 170 wild elephants, because their increasing numbers, they say, threatens the local population. Any buyers interested in taking the elephants will have to prove to Namibian authorities that they have the necessary paperwork and adequate facilities to house these animals. Here in South Africa, there are a number of private and state-run game parks that could bid for the animals if they want to. As a neighboring country, transporting the elephants by road should be easier, but South Africa already has a significant population of elephants, which often pose conservational challenges of their own. So any chance of the animals arriving in this country will probably have to be driven by strong conservational benefits that all parties can easily agree on. Travers Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Well, speaking of drought in Namibia, the UN-led month of climate action began with a dire warning from the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres that the state of the planet is broken. In Africa, the impact of climate change is being felt through floods and drought. Kenya and Sudan are among the worst affected floods. that the United Nations says have killed almost 500 people this year in just those two countries. Southern Africa, on the other hand, has been struggling with the devastating effects of drought. CGTN's Daniel Arab Moy reports.
Africa has continued to be severely hit by extreme weather and climate events. The results have been devastating, with hundreds of casualties and thousands of displaced persons. In Eastern Africa, Kenya is one of the countries severely affected by climate-related disasters. Flooding and landslides in multiple locations across the country have caused death and displacement.
Humanity is waging war on nature. This is suicidal. Nature always strikes back, and it is already doing so with growing force and fury.
According to the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, more than 86,000 people in Sudan have been affected by recent floods in at least 52 locations across the Blue Nile, one of the states hardest hit by the storms. In Somalia, floods triggered by seasonal rains have affected nearly 20,000 people in the Banaadir region, especially the capital Mogadishu, Galmudug, Southwest and Jubaland states. The floods destroyed swaths of farmland, damaged property and disrupted livelihoods.
Recent years have seen serious climate-related crises with a huge threat to food security and livelihoods.
We face three imperatives in addressing the climate crisis. First, we need to achieve global carbon neutrality within the next 3 decades. Second, we have to align global finance between the Paris Agreement, the world's blueprint for climate action. And third, we must deliver a breakthrough on adaptation to protect the world, and especially the most vulnerable people and countries, from climate impacts.
In Southern Africa, several countries have been affected by severe drought or erratic rainfall and extreme temperatures. Lesotho declared a new drought emergency last year, with national drought emergencies in Mozambique and Namibia extended this year. Daniel Arab Moy, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
All right, we have with us a professor of global environmental and climate governance, Professor Chuks Okereke, joining us live via Zoom from London. Professor, thank you for joining us here on Africa Live. It's a pleasure to have you. Let's get started with my first question, Professor. The UN Secretary General says humanity has waged a war on nature, and nature is fighting back. Does this apply to the African continent directly in terms of cause and effect? What's your opinion?
Thank you very much for having me. The answer is absolutely yes. Africa is one of the most vulnerable continents to climate change. By reason of our geography, Africa is warming faster than the rest of the world. Also, by reason of weak adaptive capacity and poor governance, Africa has a very limited ability to adapt to the dangers, risks, and damages caused by climate change. The result is that Africa is having to bear the greatest burden of the impact of climate change, even though it has contributed the least compared to other continents in the world. So you see, as you said in your clip, that many people are dying in Africa as a result of increased flood. We had last year Cyclone Ida, which resulted in the loss of over 1,300 lives across Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. And everywhere you look in Africa, the impact of climate change stares you in the face. And so Africa is really bearing the brunt of climate change, whether it's been in terms of famine, in terms of drought, in terms of heat wave, in terms of rising sea level, in terms of climate refugees and displacement. All over the place, Africa is carrying a very big burden as a result of climate change.
All right, important points and statements you've made there, Professor Okereke. I'm sure you would agree with me. It is difficult sometimes for African leaders and ordinary citizens to connect what they see happening near them to climate change. How do you think policymakers and environmentalists can communicate climate information for greater impact?
This is a very, very important question. All over Africa, you see rising incidences of flood, heat wave, and yet many other impacts of climate change. And yet sometimes it's very, very hard for people to connect these localized events with the global rise in climate change. I think that finding innovative ways to communicate climate change is one of the most important priorities for Africa. And here, media houses like you, but also journalists up and down Africa, has a lot of work to do. I have been proposing that there is a need to begin to communicate climate change through poems, through drama, through play, but also to take climate change communication into our primary, secondary, and universities in a strategic, logical, and coherent and systematic way. But also our political leaders really need to read up on climate change and begin to really open up themselves to understand more about the interactions between climate change and other facets of the economy. This is an urgent priority for Africa in the decade that we are now.
All right, Professor Chukso Kereke, let's leave it there for now. Thank you for your time here on Africa Live. We certainly appreciate it. That's Professor Chukso Kereke, a global environmentalist and climate governance professional. Thank you so much. Moving on, meanwhile, medical charity Doctors Without Borders says it has ended most of its support to healthcare centers in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo following several attacks targeting its staff this year. Ongoing violence in the region has made it difficult for health workers to provide services to patients. CGTN's Chris Ochemringa has more on that.
The manager of Doctors Without Borders say they have been forced to close most of their operations in the DRC's South Kivu province due to attacks against their staff. The decision comes 5 months after the medical charity withdrew most of its staff from the restive territory of Fizi. One of their expatriate workers was abducted in June and released several days later. Last year, the charity organization closed 2 of its Ebola treatment centers in eastern DRC after they were attacked by rebels. The east of the DRC has been plagued by conflict for over 2 decades. The UN estimates there are more than 100 rebel groups fighting over land, political power, and the control of mineral resources. Doctors Without Borders has been providing support to healthcare services in the DRC for over 10 years. Even as the MSF withdraws from Kimbi and Baraka areas of Fizi territory, it says it will keep a small number of services to ensure ongoing treatment for HIV and tuberculosis patients currently under care for the next 6 months, as well as support to health workers providing care in communities with no access to Ministry of Health clinics. Chris Ochemringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
You're watching Africa Live on CGTN. We've got a lot more coming your way after the break. Stay tuned. Here's a look at what's ahead. When conflict destabilizes food production and supply, a look at Burkina Faso's hunger crisis. And Nigerians trying to adjust to the WHO recommendations on active and healthy living.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent. You, the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for your company. I'm Richard Nta. 500,000 children in Burkina Faso are staring at hunger. The United Nations is warning the children are one step away from famine. The situation is said to be deteriorating due to a jihadist insurgency that has displaced over 1 million people. CGTN's Joy Karuki reports.
Habibo Sore is lucky to be alive. She managed to escape while pregnant with her twins. They were displaced by violence from her home in Pisila district in 2018.
The day the attackers arrived, it was in the neighboring village that they started. We got the warning that they were on their way to us. We saw them coming with 3 motorbikes and 2 people on each motorbike. They went into the neighbor's house. They had already fled and they stole everything, all the cattle. We wanted to get out as well, and I was the first to leave because I was pregnant.
Now living with her uncle in Kaya in northern Burkina Faso, Sore is facing a new reality.
Everything is different now from what it was in the village. Even here in Pisila, just to have the bare minimum to survive is very hard. We don't eat enough and we have nothing to live from like we used to in the village.
Today, she's visiting this health center supported by the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, in Kaya. Her 1.5-year-old twin sons weigh 7 kilograms each, the equivalent of a healthy 4-month-old baby. Sore is worried about their health.
Some of the women here have been psychologically affected by the violence and attacks. So how can a woman who's psychologically affected get her child out of a cycle of malnutrition? So we have this kind of a situation, which is not easy at all to deal with. Not easy at all. The other day, I was pulling too much on this woman and I asked her why she's always together with her child. She said, because my father-in-law always eats the child's rations.
An influx of villagers fleeing violence in the Sahel region has seen the population of Kaya double in the last year and a half. Thousands have been killed during attacks by Islamist groups with links to Al-Qaeda in the Sahel. The attacks have worsened food shortages that threaten millions. World Food Programme figures show the armed groups have cut off access to supplies and farmland, affecting over 7 million people who face acute hunger.
We've lost around 15 hectares of arable land for the cattle. We've lost around 60 heads of ox, without forgetting all our personal belongings. Those represent massive losses. We can't put an exact number to it. It just represents huge losses.
Over 500,000 children below 5 are acutely malnourished, UN figures show. Over 10,000 people are one step short of famine, according to the WFP. Worse still, dozens of health facilities have closed, with another 200 operating at a minimum, government figures indicate. The conflict has also affected education. Thousands of children cannot go to school. For those who can, classrooms are overflowing and with few books. Teachers like Amadou Maiga regularly take the pupils through a safety drill in case of attacks.
When we blow the whistle 3 times, the children know there is danger. And when there is danger, they have to throw themselves on the ground. And that is because we are in a classroom and children have to hide under tables and protect their heads. We do not shout, we do not speak, we do not cry, and also we don't try to run away.
The Norwegian Refugee Council has rated the situation in Burkina Faso as being worse than they have witnessed in the last decade. For those displaced, their hope is that the security situation will improve to allow them resume their normal lives. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
The World Health Organization has outlined new recommendations to help people pursue active and healthy living. They encourage physical exercises for vulnerable people, including those living with disabilities. Most of them have been cut off from such activities as many gyms and trainers aren't equipped to cater for them. CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam reports.
Working and sweating it out, Inaju Miracle pushes through the rigors and discomfort of exercising, given that she's a person living with disability. Paralyzed when she was just 9 months old following a wrongly administered injection, Miracle is determined to live an active and healthy life. The paralytic hopeful maintains a strict workout routine, first to keep healthy and also to build the stamina required for her demanding sports.
We lift weights, we do sit-up and so many exercises like that. Like it helps me in so many ways that it makes me to feel light, keep fit, and that strength, it makes me to gather some strength in my shoulders because I do strolls and I need to build up this place.
According to the World Health Organization, more than 80% of the world adolescent population is not physically active enough. The global health body recommends physical exercises to improve overall well-being, specifically at least 150 to 300 minutes of moderate intensity physical activity or 70 to 150 minutes of rigorous activities weekly. But for persons living with disabilities, physical exercises require special training skills, ease of mobility, and appropriate facilities, and these are limited here in Nigeria.
No matter your money, what we have, they will consider your wheelchair. Where are you going to put this wheelchair? Where are you going to put this one? So some of them, we look at it as burden. So we have problems with transport. The problem we have in training facilities here is most of the program we do, it requires different facilities, different equipment. And here we use general gym, general fitness equipment to train. We have a particular gym for this sport for the disabled, so but to manage them.
The WHO reports that with more active lifestyles, about 5 million deaths annually can be prevented globally. Inactive people have a 20 to 30% higher risk of contracting infectious diseases. So for many, like Inaju Miracle, their conditions make them more susceptible to a sedentary lifestyle. That's why it's important that all key players work towards creating an enabling environment for them to engage in adequate fitness activities for their overall well-being. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Well, the news continues on Africa Live. Time now for our business segment with Uche.
Thanks, Richard. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Nigeria steps up its efforts to revive oil refineries amid rising costs. And South Africa's Unemployment Insurance Fund is facing pressure to support ailing businesses.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Well, let's start off in Nigeria, where the government is stepping up its efforts to revive all oil refineries in the country as it struggles to cope with the rising costs of importing refined fuel. Now, the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation says it will begin the second phase of the rehabilitation of the Port Harcourt refinery in the first quarter of 2021. It also targets to get all 4 refineries running by 2023. Here's CGTN's Deji Batmus with more on that story.
The Port Harcourt refinery, which can process 210,000 barrels of oil per day, is Nigeria's biggest at the moment. But like the other 3 refineries, it's been operating well below its output capacity. In the past 1 year, all the refineries which are government-owned have been idle as they await maintenance. The Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation has announced it will begin maintenance works at the Port Harcourt refinery from early next year.
We have lost so much time and opportunities to build all the refineries we could have built, to create all the jobs that could have been created. And in fact, we are positioned by geography to be able to supply all the petroleum products required in West and Central Africa.
Nigeria's 4 refineries have a combined production capacity of 445,000 barrels of crude per day, which should be sufficient to meet around 70% of daily domestic demand. But with the refineries not operational, the country has been forced to import petrol for its domestic consumption, and this has come at a very huge economic cost.
So we have a very unfortunate situation where we take crude oil from the ground in Nigeria and we create wealth for several countries where these products are shipped, refined, and brought back to us.
Getting the Port Harcourt refinery up and running would help the country cut down on petrol imports and help it conserve much-needed foreign exchange in the process. In a marked, the refinery is coming at a time when work is nearing completion at the privately owned 650,000 barrels per day Dangote refinery in Lagos. The refinery is expected to come on stream in 2021, while the 4 government-operated refineries are expected to be fully operational in 2023. So if all goes according to plan, Nigeria could actually move from being a net importer of refined fuels, including petrol, to be a big exporter of the final product. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Now, Nigeria has also announced plans to ban fish imports in the next 2 years. The West African nation spends over $1 billion importing fish annually, but the country is now focusing on boosting local production. Here's CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam with more.
Fresh, smoked, dried, frozen. Kado Fish Market in Nigeria's capital is the one-stop hub for all kinds of fish. An average 10,000 tons of fish is offloaded here daily. Fish is the most accessible source of protein in Nigeria, but only 30% is produced locally and the other 70% is imported. But the government is considering a ban on fish imports by 2022.
If you say you want to ban fish, how many fish are you which? And you must first of all tell Nigerians the type of fish you want to ban and what are the substitutes. What are the alternatives to those fish? Do we have them? And if we don't have them, you cannot ban what you don't have, what you don't produce. You must have those products before you ban. If you don't, then you are going to cause more damage to the economy. We must first of all identify the fish that the common man can afford. It is when we do that, then we can say, yes, we can now decide to ban fish. We have arrived.
Nigeria has a huge annual fish demand of about 3.6 million metric tons. Local production amounts to 1.1 million metric tons. Report from the country's central bank shows that every year, Nigeria spends $1.2 billion on fish imports. So experts see the import ban as a welcome development.
It's going to have a great effect on the local fish production. Fisheries value chain is very huge, from production to processing, processing to value addition, from value addition to packaging, and then to the retailing. So it's going to have a lot of effect in creating jobs and employment and even boosting local GDP if proper strategies are put in place to caution the effect that is going to happen after the ban.
Initiating a ban on the importation of fish is just one step. However, there are other factors to be considered.
You need to ensure that these small-scale farmers that made up the major fish producer in Nigeria are trained on good agricultural practice. They have access to capital to expand their fish production. Youth are made up of over 60% of the workforce in Nigeria. You need to encourage these youth that do not have any source of living to come into fish production. You also need to increase value addition, because even when they produce, we still have wastage in the fish sector. And so you need to increase or make them have access to local improved technology in terms of fish processing.
Fisheries sector contributes about 4.5% to the national GDP. Experts project the figures could rise by 10% if the problems of insecurity and weak infrastructure are tackled. Although it's still a long way to closing the demand gap in the fisheries sector, experts believe boosting local production is a step in the right direction. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
And heading to South Africa now, the country's unemployment insurance fund has come under heavy pressure to support ailing businesses and employees affected by the COVID-19 lockdown. Now, the Department of Labour has warned that any more relief could cripple the fund, leaving millions of people in the country without any relief at all. Here's our correspondent Cyril Nta with more.
Last month, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced that the COVID-19 temporary employer-employee relief scheme would be extended to help those affected with their loss of income. $3.6 million has already been paid to those in need. But the Department of Labour, which oversees the Unemployment Insurance Fund, has warned that any more relief will cause the scheme to collapse.
Initially, our budget for this was 40 billion. For the initial 3 months period. And consequently, the lockdown period was extended to where it is now. The payments were at 54 billion rands, which is almost 14 billion more. With the latest extension from the 16th to the 15th of October, we had indicated that our ability to continue paying the test benefit is becoming less and less.
But labour unions believe it's critical to keep the relief scheme going, especially for businesses, so they can hold on to their employees and hire more staff. According to Statistics South Africa, 2 million people lost their jobs since the hard lockdown began in March. Unemployment in South Africa is now at 30.8%.
What's going to happen now is that you have a situation where many of these employers who've been cooperating, trying to keep these workers in their books because they were partnering with labor and government through the UIF Test Fund, they are going to really let go of these workers because most of them have not reached the production levels where they can afford these workers. So what's going to happen, we are going to see more retrenchments because employers without a test fund, they are clear they are going to let go of some of these workers.
To make matters worse, the temporary employer-employee relief scheme has been marred by fraud and corruption. Government put the scheme on hold for the Auditor General to investigate.
The Unemployment Insurance Fund was struggling before COVID-19. The impacts of the virus has just exacerbated its problems. While the government is committing further funding, the Treasury is scrambling to find the money. The Finance Minister has already warned of a growing debt burden in South Africa.
With the economy still in a deep recession and unemployment rising, South Africa finds itself in a very tight corner. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, African startup and online supplier of goods to micro-retailers, Sokowatch, is now deploying electric tuk-tuks or rickshaws, a first on the continent. This will help the firm/fleet maintenance costs by more than 50%. The move is a potentially welcome effort in a region where cities are grappling with growing air pollution caused by exhaust fumes from beat-up and poorly serviced vehicles. Here's CGTN's Alexandria Majala with the details.
Now we are connecting the battery.
28-year-old Mary Marjorie Nanchinga works for Sokowatch. The company is an online supplier of goods to micro-retailers. And now Sokowatch is deploying electric tuk-tuks, a first on the continent that could slash fleet maintenance costs by more than half.
And we truly do believe that electric vehicles are the future of mobility, both around the world, but also specifically in Africa, and especially when it comes to powering commerce for retailers across the continent.
The Kenyan-based firm developed an app which small retailers in East Africa can log orders of various goods to restock their shops. Once the orders are received, Sokowatch then dispatches the goods from its warehouses to the retailers. In a region where cities are plagued by gridlock with narrow and potholed roads, Sokowatch adopted the three-wheeled rickshaws as a primary means of transport to deliver the goods.
Before I got to know about Sokowatch, I would run out of stock and not have anyone to help me replenish it. I lost a lot of customers, but now everything is fine. I simply contact Sokowatch and they will deliver my stock.
Previously, micro-retailers would have to travel downtown in order to be able to get the stock that they needed. This would cost them time, this would cost them money in terms of the customers that they were not serving, and also in terms of shop security. When you leave your shop in the hands of someone else, you don't know what's happening when you're not there.
The move is a potentially welcome effort in a region where cities are grappling with growing air pollution caused by exhaust from beat-up and poorly serviced vehicles. The firm is looking to expand elsewhere in Africa after their success in East Africa and capture more of the continent's small retailers that it estimates at 10 million. SocoWatch has so far deployed 8 locally assembled electric tuk-tuks in Uganda and is looking to deploy an additional 8 in Rwanda before rolling out the vehicles in Kenya and Tanzania.
Number 1 is our forward gear and number 3 is our reverse gear.
The firm currently has 178 gasoline-powered tuk-tuks, in addition to the 8 electric vehicles in Uganda. The vehicles are used to deliver goods from its warehouses to 17,000 micro-retailers across 9 cities in East Africa. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
And that's all for now on Africa Live Biz. But coming up ahead on Global Business Africa, we'll be taking a look at the move by Nigeria's central bank to devalue the naira as it seeks to close the gap between official and black market rates. Of course, all that coming up top of the hour. For now, it is back to you.
Thank you so much, Uche. We are not done just yet. We've got a lot more amazing stories coming your way. We'll see you on the other side of the break with more stories. Here's what's coming up. Zimbabwe turns to the silver screen to raise awareness about wildlife conservation and the fight against poaching.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Beleza Marcio Lopes has been practicing and teaching capoeira in Cape Town since 1999. Originally developed by slaves in Brazil in the 16th century, capoeira is a mix of dance, gymnastic performance, and martial art, and is practiced around the world. Despite setbacks, Beleza continues to hold on to his dream of celebrating the heritage of African slaves through this unique form.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us and tuning in. Zimbabwe is using the silver screen to fight poaching and raise awareness about wildlife conservation. An award-winning feature film that highlights the high risk of poaching has premiered at cinemas in the country, and there are plans to have the film shown to rural communities. CGTN's Fry Wakatuya has that story.
This was not the life I had imagined for myself. But my choices had led me there.
Down on his luck, Sulu turns to poaching and finds himself facing the consequences of his actions. Gonarijo's writer, Sydney Taibavashe, hopes this story will deter those tempted by the promise of quick riches.
Most of the people don't know, just think game rangers will just play hide and seek with them in the game parks, but there's an order, there's a shoot to kill order that's there. If you get in the game parks, it's shoot to kill. So you have to know what's waiting for you if you decide to do it.
Taibavashe began writing the story in 2013 after the cyanide poisoning of over 300 elephants in Hwange National Park. He wants to strike a blow against the international networks behind the illicit trade.
all these syndicates, they can't get the rhino horn if they don't end up talking to the guy who lives next to the game park. So the guy who lives next to the game park is the one who gets into the game park and brings the rhino horn outside of the game park, and it goes on from there. So this film is also targeted at those people. When they see what really happens when you get into those game parks, they might think twice before doing it. So when you cut the chain there, it might be difficult for them now to find the people who actually go into the game parks to do the dirty work for them.
It's hoped that a movie will have more impact than traditional conservation promotion platforms.
Documentaries tend to tell a linear story. They often are speaking to the converted, and they often are inaccessible to many people. So although they're outstanding and they give us a sort of message, they're not cutting across the demographics of the community. By contrast, a film like Gonorizo tells many layers of the story. So you can hear the story from many sides. You get caught up in the emotion.
Gonorizo won the Best Feature Narrative at the 2020 Pan-African Film Festival, an achievement that will help the local industry.
Film in Zimbabwe isn't that big, though there's no support in terms of like financially and in terms of policies. I think this is the beginning of people realizing what film can bring to the table.
Gonorizo has premiered at cinemas in 3 cities here, but now plans are underway to have public viewings in rural communities so that its message can reach as many people as possible. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
It's time now for your sports news. Don't go away. Here's what's coming up. 2 teams from East Africa qualify for the 2021 Africa Under-20 Cup of Nations.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Welcome into Sport on Africa Live. Let's talk a bit of football. The Kenyan Under-20 football team has failed to qualify for the African Under-20 Cup of Nations in Mauritania next year. In the qualifying tournament that has just ended in Tanzania, Kenya was defeated in the 3rd place playoffs by South Sudan after going down 2-1 at the Black Rhino Academy in Arusha, Tanzania. The country had set high standards for the young players, hoping to send the national side to the tournament for the first time. Now, in the final match, Uganda edged host Tanzania 4-1 to win the competition and qualify for the tournament. The Kenyan coach spoke about his team's disappointing run in Tanzania.
Maybe CECAFA will change their criteria of coming up with these teams, because sincerely speaking, Uganda, they were overage. I don't know if they'll change, but if maybe we need to improve football in our region, I think we just need to go with the right age during that tournament.
And in more football news, under pressure, manager